What's going on, guys? I'm coming at you today on a 2016 KTM 1290 Super Adventure. Brought to you courtesy of the good folks up at Ride on Moto, your authorized KTM dealer in Winchester, Virginia. Really excited to be out on this bike, give you guys a full review. Fortunately, yesterday I was able to take this thing out, put it through its paces, really see what its capabilities are, and now I'm going to share with you my thoughts. Let's just go over a couple of specs real quick. I'm not going to spec you to death with numbers. This is the same 1300 1cc engine that they use in the 1290 Super Duke and the 1290 Super Duke GT, which is a bike I reviewed just a few weeks ago. If you didn't see that review, check out right up there in the corner. I'll link it. I'll also link it in the description below. Now, this is a little bit different than the Super Duke GT engine in that it has been tuned differently. It's down 13 peak horsepower from 173 to 160, but it has been tuned for more mid-range. And this one definitely pulls at a lower RPM than what the GT did. Now, one of the first things you're going to notice when you take a look at this bike is its sheer size. It looks massive. And part of that's to do with a nearly 8-gallon fuel tank on it, which means you can ride this thing about 300 miles before you're going to have to think about stopping to fill up. Now, another thing, you do have a 17-inch rear wheel that's fitted with a 170 tire, and you do have a 19-inch front wheel, which is definitely going to help out off-road. More on that later. Now, even though the bike looks massive, it's not really that heavy. It comes in right around 550 pounds. I think before you put fuel in it. Obviously with a big tank like this, it's going to add to some weight. Now that we're on this boring stretch of road, I'll go over some of the other stuff this bike comes with on it. It does come with saddlebags from the factory. It does have a semi-active suspension, much like the Super Duke GT has, though it does have an additional setting on it that the Super Duke GT does not have, which is an off-road setting, which, obviously is for off-road purposes. It also has the different drive modes, which control the throttle response, control the traction control, all the electronic sensors on it that are going to keep this thing getting the power to the pavement and keep you from slipping. Now, in sport mode and street mode, you get all 160 horsepower on tap. Much like the Super Duke GT, you also have rain mode that's going to cut the horsepower back to 100 horsepower. You also have off-road mode, which is also going to cut you back to 100 horsepower. Now, the Super Duke GT came with heated grips. The Super Adventure also has heated grips, but let's add in a heated seat, both for the passenger and the rider, and they're both adjustable independently. So for the rider, you can adjust it up on your regular toggle switch here. The passenger actually has a little switch that they can adjust it with themselves to get the right amount of heat. Also, which seems to be standard issue on KTM's bikes now, you do have a tire pressure monitoring system. You also have the ability to change the dampening for 1 up, 2 up, 1 up plus luggage, 2 up plus luggage, same exact menu as what the Super Duke GT had. You do have a 12-volt power outlet right here. You also have a little storage compartment right here on the side. You are outfitted once again, full LED taillight, turn signals, got a nice, really bright headlight, and a pretty good high beam. And obviously we can't forget the cruise control, because that is an awesome feature. Oh yeah, and the other couple things I just thought of, you do have ABS, obviously, and self-canceling turn signals also on this bike. I don't want to get into a whole chain drive or shaft drive debate. Obviously this KTM, like all KTMs, is outfitted with a chain. It also has a dual-sided swing arm as opposed to the single-sided that the GT had. But it does have a center stand, so if you're going to be doing touring riding, you can pop this thing up on the center stand and have this chain lubed at the end of the day in about 10 seconds. Now, while this is a brand new bike, this isn't a brand new model. It actually came out in 2015. 2016 had some minor updates. I know they changed the cartridge in the front fork. They also did some software updates to the suspension. They may have done some other software updates, minor tweaks. Alright, so I had two major concerns before taking this bike out to really try it out. Concern number one was, I spent a lot of time on the ADV Rider forum, specifically the Super Adventure Owners thread, So I was afraid I was going to be biased to some of the problems owners had pointed out. My second concern was I didn't know if it was going to be comfortable enough for my passenger. Those of you who have been following my channel for a long time know that we do a lot of touring riding, and if Kristen's not going to be comfortable in the back of this, I don't care how awesome it is, I'm probably not going to have one in the garage. Let me just touch on a few of the things I was going to be on the lookout for according to other owners. Number one, the windshield. A lot of people were complaining about buffeting. I'm happy to report I had no buffeting, none whatsoever. It was so quiet sitting behind this thing, way better than my FJR 1300 with the touring windshield. And Kristen also said her head was perfectly still. Now keep in mind, I am 5'10", and I have a 32-inch inseam. So if you're taller or shorter, or you got shorter legs, it may be totally different for you. But I'm happy to report that for me, it works great. Another thing, there were a couple riders that were complaining about the suspension. It was too soft. Yeah, I don't know where they got that from. This suspension's awesome. We rode 2-up. I'm not the lightest guy in the world. I come in right around 200 pounds. Kristen is basically like a block of muscle, so even though she may not look very big, she's not. I'm gonna get smacked in the head for that. Anyway, let's just say, even with us sitting on the bike, it did a great job both on-road and off-road, which I'll get to the off-road thing here in just a couple minutes. One thing that I'm gonna agree with some of the owners, the steering dampener on it, it leaves a little bit to be desired. I would probably either upgrade it or maybe see about maybe putting a little bit heavier oil in it. Around 40 mile an hour, I was getting a little more front end shake than I'd like. Now that does even out once you get up to speed, but yeah, I'll agree on the steering dampener. Now, one thing this bike doesn't have that the GT had is this does not have a quick shifter. That doesn't really bother me. The quick shifter was nice and all, but even without it, this bike shifts quickly enough. So let's get on to my actual impressions of riding the bike. First off, I agree with everyone that owns one and everyone that's ridden one in that this engine is amazing. This is the reason to own this bike, the power plant. This 1300 1cc V-twin is unbelievable. The power is there everywhere. The torque is great. It's, for a big V-twin like this, it's smooth as can be. If you don't like this engine, then there's something wrong with you. When it comes to the brakes, once again, brakes on this bike, great. You got Brembos. I believe we've got 320 millimeter 4-piston calipers all the way, on the front, and we've got Brembos on the back as well. Brakes are phenomenal. All right, let me talk about the suspension. Now, like I said, you've got 4 different settings. You've got sport, street, comfort, and off-road. Tried them all out, and they all do what they're advertised to do. This bike does have 7.9 inches of suspension travel, which is one of the reasons why I like it. I do, obviously, a lot of touring riding around the country, and unfortunately, not everyone's roads are well maintained, and there's been quite a few times we've bottomed out the suspension on the FJR, which only has about 4 inches of travel. This thing's got twice the suspension travel as your standard sport touring bike, which it should. I mean, it's an adventure tour, but that is one of the things that makes me gravitate toward a bike like this, is the fact that, even if you're not going to take it off-road, which I think a lot of owners probably won't, it's still going to be great for, those crappy roads that you ride on a daily basis. But if we're getting right down to it, a few things. Number one, this thing's called a super adventure, which means you're supposed to take it on adventures. And it's made by KTM, which means it's basically a big giant dirt bike. So you've got to take it off-road just to see what it could do, and that's what we did yesterday. We rode up to Dolly Sods, West Virginia. Made a video about it. I'll link that right up there. But we ended up taking that thing off-road, which was a lot of gravel, some hard-packed dirt, and some of it was just beat to hell for 17.5 miles. I put it in off-road dampening. I put it in off-road drive mode. I'll be the first to admit I'm not a great dirt bike rider. I'm no Ryan Dungey, but this thing took every bump, every beat up, hole, water, rut, anything, and just soaked it all up, and it was actually a pretty comfortable ride. I probably would have stood up off the pegs a little bit more, but having a passenger on the back, it's a little awkward. I don't think Kristen quite enjoyed it as much as I did. Am I going to take this thing off-road much if I were to own one? Probably not, but it's nice to know that I can. What's really impressive about it is a bike that weighs what this thing weighs, and the size of it, and the fact that we're riding 2-up. The fact that it was able to do what it did off-road, super impressive. One thing I didn't touch on is the comfort of the bike. I rode it, I think we were like 256 miles yesterday. And I'm going to compare it to my FJR because that's what I tour on, and that's what I've got, you know, tens of thousands of miles on. It's actually more comfortable. My hands are a little more upright, and I know I could fix that on the FJR with some riser bars. But the big thing is, on the FJR, my knees do still get sore after long distance riding, and I've got to stretch them out. This bike, not at all. Also, I really like the factory seat. Now, I know that's something some people are going to complain about, and they want to go spend $400 or $500 on another seat. If you do, great. I've always gotten along fine with factory seats and maybe throwing a sheepskin over them. I'd probably do the same damn thing with this bike. Now that I've kind of addressed the fact that my, you know, knowing about some of the problems really wasn't a problem, and this bike's phenomenal, you know, my other big concern was how comfortable is Kristen going to be? I can't really answer that for you, so let's ask her.
So how was it riding on the back of the Super Adventure?
Surprisingly comfortable. The seat has a lot of padding, so I didn't feel like I was sliding forward. It's kind of grippy. And the pegs seem to be a little higher, so my knees don't hurt. On the back riding, I mean, I do have a little bit of blockage with you sitting in front, but for the most part, the air doesn't like rattle me around a lot, which I like.
And how does it compare to riding on the back of the FJR?
Similar, but I prefer this one. It is more comfortable. I feel like it has a little bit more room.
All right, anything else?
The only other thing is to have a backrest. With the FJR, we have that, so it was a little, my back got a little tired sitting up like this, but if I had that, I think it'd be a lot better.
All right, so now you've heard Kristen's thoughts on the bike. Let me give you a quick wrap up on my thoughts. Comfortable bike, great power, superb handling, excellent braking. There's a couple little things I'm nitpicking, like the steering dampener. Probably a couple little things I'd change on it, but for the type of riding I do and the type of riding I like to do, I think I'd be hard-pressed to find a bike that's gonna do it as well as this KTM 1290 Super Adventure. So your mileage may vary. I love this thing. Now guys, I'm sure there's some things I missed or didn't mention in the video, or things that you might be interested in, and if I missed those things, go ahead and comment, ask me the questions below. I put plenty of miles on this thing yesterday, so hopefully I can give you a good answer. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed today's on-bike test and review. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, I look forward to you subscribing. Once again, big thank you to Ride on Moto, your official KTM authorized dealer in Winchester, Virginia, and I will talk to you guys again soon.
Can I get one?
I think it might be a possibility.